In this video, we'll be focusing on the key concepts of Apex. We'll be taking a look at tags, macro and variable types, downloading the Apex software and drivers from the RTI dealer portal. Then our technical trainer will guide you through a multi-room system, the rooms, and a step-by-step breakdown on macros, variables, page links, and texts. We'll explore how they apply to tags in your system file. Let's get started.
Whether it's a standalone command, system command, secondary commands, we call them, the nomenclature in Apex is a macro. Can be one or multiple inside of a tag. Pretty straightforward, just want to make sure that when you read things and you're talking about it, we're calling them macros. Controller macros are at the very top of our pyramid. They're not going to be used too often, but you're going to use a controller macro in the instance where you, for example, want to shoot out standalone IR because for whatever reason you don't have control going back to this processor in a specific room. Maybe it's something outdoors and you need to be able to control a TV. That's going to be a controller macro. You could have had other macros in play. As soon as you put switch it to a controller macro, it trumps everything. Room macros are what you saw where we're doing our specific scenes. We want to share, when we want functions shared by all rooms and devices. Those are our activity tags. Source macros, that's 90% of what's automatically programmed for you. That's the source, typically the transport macros and all that kind of fun stuff. Last but not least, global macros. If you remember, I asked you to get that global image in your head at the beginning of our webinar. We placed that Nuvo wireless streamer into the global section of the workplace, and we also made it a global macro, which meant that now that device was going to be able to be shared across all rooms, that source shared across all rooms and devices. Same holds true for variables, same priority. We'll look at variables here shortly. Here's your visual. Matt's going to reference this all the time. At the pinnacle of that pyramid, at the very peak, controller macros. I need to do something specific on a controller. And at the very bottom, broad, wide open, I want to share this source across multiple rooms on multiple devices. Okay, quick recap here. Apex is a source-based programming platform. And what's great about Apex is it takes advantage of auto programming. And if you are noticing, it creates programming efficiencies based upon that auto programming and following the workflow that are going to lead to more time spent on the intuitive interface design, which is what sells at the end of the day, which is going to lead to more profitability, more cheddar in your pocket. This is a big one. Rooms can both be physical and virtual. In Apex version 1, if you have a global controller, you have an RTI panel that you want to use throughout your entire system file in every single room, whatever it may be, you simply make a room and call it your global room. More than likely will be a global macro, and you'll put that RTI panel, for example, in there and have it connect to the sources that you want it to connect to. Things can be physical. We've been showing you physical rooms. In Apex, it can also mean virtual. The workspace is there for you as a programmer. It is creating your containers, if you will. It allows you to compartmentalize your programming thoughts, if you will, your collection of how you want things organized and how they're going to speak to each other. You could be in a large commercial environment, a loft setting, and they've built glass conference rooms, and it's all open, but there's kind of a different function of space, reception, a little lounge area, a workstation area, and you have keypads and RTI panels for executives, what have you. Make it individual rooms within a rooms. Name them whatever the heck you want. Put that in the workspace. There's no right or wrong way to do that. All right, follow the workflow. I promise you, I know that you can get in there and go do it different ways. Please trust me, follow this workflow. I'm sure someone on this webinar is going to find a more effective, efficient way of programming, and they're going to do me the favor and email me and tell me all about it so I can share it with everybody else. But for now, until you get your feet underneath you, follow that workflow. Macros and variables follow a priority. I don't care if you say it out loud or in your head. Heck, put it on a Post-it note, stick it on your computer. What are you trying to control and where are you trying to control it? Reference your workbook. Last but not least, tags. For now, the macro types, tags, all these things, they're going to rock your brain. You're going to be thinking about them, and it's going to hurt. One moment you're going to get it, the next minute you're going to go, what? You have resources, and you have us here to help you out. Today, a tag is just holding everything. It's just where you put everything into. It's your Well, all right. I'm going to go and have Matt, the man, the myth, the legend, get his PC fired up with some Apex on it, and he's going to be ready to help you shift some major paradigms. So here we go.
Welcome everyone to part 2. I know this is the second half. I'm going to be primarily focusing on all of the bits and pieces that you saw in a quick hurry, and we're going to tear them down bit by bit, explain why we're doing what we're doing, give you a better feel of where we operate within the workspace, and then at the very end kind of tie everything together with some of the cool features that are built in and baked right into Apex as a software. In case you hadn't known already, the software is available. It's available on the dealer website. If you go to the software tab, you'll see Integration Designer 9 as well as Integration Designer Apex. If you go to the Learn More button, you'll see at the very bottom the installation for that. Also, as a note, we put this on our website as well, that you can run ID9 and Integration Designer Apex simultaneously. One will not affect another, so you're not going to have any problems with something being buggy in one and it's causing a problem in another one. So that's completely separate, and we understand there's going to be a large amount of time between people using existing ID9 files or creating new files in Apex, or back and forth, or you're just trying to, test Apex, test the water for a while, see how you like it, while still designing stuff in ID9. We get it. You'll either love it right away, or you'll just kind of gradually gravitate to it as more features pop in. But just keep in mind that we do have both studios in mind, and both will be supported for quite some time. The second piece I want to take note of is the driver store. The driver store is very similar for both ID9 and for Apex. The drivers will work within ID9 and Apex. In fact, many of the drivers have already been optimized for Apex. When I say optimized, I mean that the driver has tags placed inside of them so that when that device is added to a system file, it will auto-populate pages for you based on our templates. So if you have any old existing drivers, or maybe some third-party drivers that you've purchased or even created yourself, that can be easily imported into Apex. You just might not take advantage of that auto programming that's built in. So all your variables are there, all your commands are still there, just that added benefit isn't. As of now, I believe we're at somewhere around 75%, 80% of our drivers have been optimized for Apex. There's nothing different on the website right now. At some point we may put, a little button that says optimize for Apex, something to that nature. But as of now, inside of Apex, there's a little source icon. I'll speak to that later in the driver tab that lets you know that it has been changed for some of the features that are available in Apex. So just keep that in mind. All right, let's jump into Integration Designer Apex. I'm actually going to create a new system file. In case you haven't already, in the webinar software If you pull over the little window and there's a couple little breakout windows, under handouts there is a Apex workbook that I'm going to be referencing quite frequently here. You don't necessarily have to download and have it on your computer, but just maybe grab it for later. There's a line diagram that I'll be referencing. This kind of shows our multi-room layout that I'll be working on. You can see there's some pictures of the, floor plan and some of all the other devices, but this is what I'll be primarily basing the programming structure on. This structure is based upon a kiosk we here have at RTI headquarters, and while it is a little RTI gear heavy, we understand that, and not very many sources, but it does work as a great basis for showing and understanding a multi-room layout or a multi-area layout, however you want to look at it. So just keep that in mind. Also in the workbook, there is a pyramid. You saw this briefly before. We will use this extensively as we explain where macros and variables live based within a tag, and wherever that tag is located will determine the commands used. And again, I'll speak to this quite a lot here as we move on. The very first thing we'll do is create a new system file. We'll just call this, you'll see I've been using test quite heavily. We'll use test34 just to see what's going on with it. And we're going to go ahead and choose our XP8S. You can choose standalone mode if you want to as well. And you can always, if you're just using a keypad or a remote line of sight, you'd have to choose some sort of mode to begin with. In this example, we'll just use our processor and, of course, name it whatever we wish at the bottom of the screen. The next part is adding rooms, and this is where a line diagram comes very, very handy, is you have to have some sort of idea of how you're going to lay out your system. Whether it's on paper or whether it's on your head, you need to find some way to organize this, because we're no longer just controller-based and we can't just piece these things together and keep adding controllers. We have to have a larger understanding of the entire system file and how it's going to be based out. Now, yeah, you can kind of piece together and do a single room and then kind of build into another room and add another device. You can, but when you start getting into other devices that can be used across the entirety of the system file, you have to start thinking a little bit more three-dimensionally rather than just individual rooms themselves. And you'll see why this comes into play a little bit later on. So let's go ahead and add some of my rooms. Living room, kitchen, you can name them whatever you want. You can choose some of our pre-made names, whichever works best for you. Really, whatever suits your fancy on that throughout the entire system. And then we have the bathroom. Oops, spelling. Now you have noticed that I skipped over the AV rack, which is kind of our centrally located equipment. The reason I'm skipping this is because I am choosing to use my global container in the workspace on the left to create a global room, which I'm renaming as AV rack, or I'll name it AV rack in the future. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want to access those sources, those devices, from any other controller throughout the entire system file. Now, granted, that's, you may or may not be using a streaming source like that, or maybe you have a smaller system where the receiver is sitting in one spot and maybe you're using zone 2 out of it. Well, that might sit in the global situation as well, or lighting for that matter. It might want to reside there. So there's different levels, and we'll kind of explain the workspace as we go. You see on the left-hand side, here's all of our rooms listed, and you can see how they're organized by sources and by controllers. Let's go ahead and add some of our sources. We'll be primarily working in the living room kitchen, just to give you a better idea of an actual system. And we're going to add some infrared devices. Now, some of you may be awfully familiar with this infrared tab and this IR database that is now included within Apex. This does come from the world of ProControl. So if some of you are using our sister software, our sister company's software, this is the same wonderful IR database that is included. This is baked right into Apex. No more do you have to kind of fight with your own CML files, although you can still use your old CML files. Whether it's IR, RS-232, same IR library manager runs both of them. Same RS-232 lib files, so you can still use those and point to them on your own free will as well. So let's go ahead and search the database. We'll look for a Insignia TV. I'm not even looking for a model number. I'm just looking for a specific type and a device. Go ahead and grab code group 1. Again, make sure we're in the living room kitchen and select next. Next port, of course, is going to ask me if I want to do some port routing. You can certainly do that, or you can skip that altogether. I'm just going to rename this Insignia TV just for the sake of brevity and choose Add Device. And let's go ahead and add one more. Sony Blu-ray, most models. I'll do port 2. You'll see, as Justin has pointed out, port 1 has been renamed as my previous source. You can edit these, you can change them later, you can do your port routing at a later time. It's just to help you get you started through the system file and get everything built in the workspace on the left. I'll choose port 2. Again, I'll rename this, just shorten it up a little bit, and select Add Device. I'm going to click No on here to close the Add Device window, and just let's explain what's going on in the workspace to the left. We have our global, which our processor lives in. We have some drivers, sources. Of course, nothing's under here yet. In the living room kitchen, we have our controllers, and we have sources, and we have our 3 sources. We have Home, Insignia TV, and Sony Blu-ray. Now, while these may not be considered sources like Home, because Home doesn't really have a specific source or a device tied to it, but think of them as collection of pages. When I'm in the living room kitchen, when I select Home, this will be my list of home pages. When I'm on the Insignia TV, this will be my list of Insignia TV pages. Or when I'm on the Sony Blu-ray, this will be all of the Sony Blu-ray pages. And that's how we're organizing. We're no longer organizing by the specific controller, because let's face it, when you have a whole bunch of 5-6 controllers in one system file, it gets a little tricky navigating, especially when you're working with a specific source. You're either copying and pasting buttons, you're importing, merging pages across multiple devices, and it gets a little bit hard to manage. This will allow a lot easier way to navigate your specific sources, and we'll get into that later as well. For now, let's go ahead and march through our handy-dandy workbook, and we're going to keep adding a whole bunch of these RTI devices to take a look at the pages that are auto-populated for us. We'll start in the living room kitchen. We'll go ahead and choose our T2X and select Next. On the right-hand side of our screen, you'll see it wants to add a home page, Insignia TV, Sony Blu-ray. Sounds good. You can select these now. You can add them, delete them later. You can add them in later. You can modify the names. You can change whatever you want to do with them. This is just, again, to get the ball rolling, get the workspace on the left set up and ready to go right off the bat. I'll select Add Device, and I'm just going to keep going right through the list here according to my workbook of all the RTI equipment in this system file. Same pages. There's also the page template on the left if some of you are familiar with creating template pages of that nature. As of now, we have Obsidian. The old one was Oasis. So whether you're a fan of the new one or the old one, the new one is the one that's baked in right now. And I will continue to go through my system file. I may change a few of these just to make it a little bit better looking, because no one ever said I wish I had less touch panels in my house, but you never know. So I'm going to keep going through entry, KX3. I like KX3s. They're a pretty powerful little device. Bedroom, we'll add a T1B Plus. And then finally, we'll add the RK1 Plus to the bathroom. Sweet. Okay, I'll press no. I'll bounce out, and you'll now see on the far left-hand side of our screen, We have our controllers listed on our living room kitchen. We have our controllers under the garage, entry, bedroom, all the controllers are listed, and then the sources. For now, I'm just going to go ahead and collapse the other rooms, since that's not where we're going to be explaining the majority of our work today. Now, when I select the home source, you'll see for the T2X, we have a home page, and for the KX7, we have our home pages as well. The reasoning for this is because if you're in the same room and you have multiple controllers, chances are the home pages across multiple controllers is going to be about the same. Obviously, if you put a watch Blu-ray button on your KX7, you're probably going to have a watch Blu-ray button on your T2X as well. So that allows us to navigate back and forth between these two pages, create the same look and feel, and use the same programming over and over again. Same thing for the Insignia TV. If I was using, maybe, of course there's no smart features in this, but if you were, or if you didn't want the page altogether, this is where you would program everything. You'll see the hard buttons on the right, all the green check marks we were talking about, those are all pre-programmed for me. And of course the KX7, same look and feel. Of course, we don't naturally have any hard buttons associated with this, but we do emulate that with soft buttons on the screen. And these are also all programmed in the same kind of manner as we would the T2X. And of course, this follows suit on the Sony Blu-ray as well. So across the board, we're now grouping by sources, and you will occasionally select the controller and be confused where your pages are. We get it. I do that frequently. I do that more frequently than I care to admit. But just what happens when you go back and forth between two different platforms. And they are vastly different. The concepts are, for all intents and purposes, about the same. It just all has to do with organization and how you want to lay out your system file. So it's very, very important to get that first step, the first organization of your workspace on the left, set right off the bat. So let's tear into tags. I know this is the part that's going to raise a lot of eyebrows and will continue to give headaches, but I think we have a pretty good explanation of what's going on with these tags. When I select my play button, you'll look at the top of the screen, there's a tag toolbar. Also, just to note, this tag toolbar may reside at the bottom of your screen. It may reside at the top. Any of these workspace windows that you're seeing on the left and right of the screen, they can be moved around all over. So just keep in mind when I'm referring to a specific tab or a specific place on the screen, it may be somewhere else. It just depends on where you want to drag it, your level of customization within the suite itself, or maybe if you're running a multi-monitor setup, you might want to drag all those windows off to the side. It's entirely up to you. Let's take a look at our play button. At the top of our screen in our tag toolbar, you'll see we have a button that's selected. It's tagged as play. And to the right of that, we have some buttons here that are highlighted or grayed out. We have a global macro, source macro, room macro, controller macro. To the right of that, we have variable, global variable, source variable, room variable, and controller variable. We have a page link, and we have some text tags. Let's kind of gloss over those for now, and let's pay attention to the source macro. Everything within Apex is now living inside of a tag. No longer are we putting individual commands on a button. We are now placing commands inside of a tag. Those commands that we're placing inside of a tag, no matter if it's a single one, a multi-step process, or even just as simple as a page link, they are now all considered macros. Just some nomenclature changes there. To access the actual commands and to see my macro list, there's two ways I can access that. I can select the source macro at the top in my tag toolbar or at the bottom, wherever it lives. Or I can choose the macro list on the left as long as I'm in the correct source. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. You'll now see we have play tag. It has a macro, sure, and then at the bottom it has the individual command. Now let's back up. If I go in the top left-hand corner, you'll see back and forward arrows. Those of us who have used the internet in the past 20 years will be fairly familiar with that concept. And I can go back and forward within the system file. Same thing with a mouse. If you have the back and forward buttons on your mouse, you can use that as well just to navigate back and forth between your macro list and your controller. So keep that in mind when I'm saying backwards and forwards in the system file. The other way to access this same source macro list is on the left-hand side. You can select macro list, pops that up and again. So if I go back, go forward, back to controller, there's just two ways to access that. If you want to make any changes to the commands that live inside a tag, you can do that down below. You can delete that. I'm going to change this to, let's say cursor 0. And now if I navigate back to my T2X, the same play tag, but now the command inside the tag has been changed. As long as I'm in the same source, that play tag will also change on my KX7. So again, here's the play button, play tag, source macro has now been changed to digit 0. And all of this all ties back to our handy dandy pyramid. We were living in the source macro level, the slice of the pie on the right. And depending on where we are, not only as far as where the tag is, but also what's programmed on that tag will determine the scope of that tag and how far it reaches within the system file. So let's take a look at that one more time. We're going to go to a different source. We'll select the Insignia TV. Select the play button on our Insignia TV. You'll see in the top left, we're in the source configuration for the TV now. Same play tag. But because I'm on a different source, it's now tied to the Insignia TV for play. And same thing with the T2X. I'm still in Insignia TV. It's still programmed at the source level. It's going to be for the Insignia TV play. If I ever need to change the level at which I'm operating on, so let's say I want to do the play command the same regardless of anywhere, as long as I'm in the living room kitchen, regardless of the controller, regardless of the source, I want to have the same command. We can do that. If I select the play button, I'll simply select the room macro level, and this will bring us now to the room configuration. You'll notice it's a different color. We've now moved up a level in that pyramid. I'm going to go ahead and add digit 3 to the play tag. Now, when I go back and select my play button, you'll see we've moved. We've migrated up in that pyramid based on the oops, that's the line diagram. There we go. Based on our hierarchy of the pyramid itself. So room macro, of course, is a little more important than source, so therefore it wins. We still have that source macro programmed, but because room macro is higher in priority, it takes control over everything else. So now, as long as I'm living within the living room kitchen, anything that has that play tag will now be changed to the next level. So if I go to a different source and select that play button with the play tag, it will also migrate to the next level because it's available. So now this entire, anywhere within the living room kitchen, the play tag has now been changed. What's this useful for? Well, how about volume up, down, and mute? Chances are those are going to be the same across an entire room or an entire area, or you're in a commercial setting for the entire front end, or for the warehouse, or for the offices. It allows you to organize the same tag throughout multiple areas. You can even go one step further, or even one step farther up in our pyramid, and that's the controller level. Let's say for my T2X, no matter where I use this T2X, I want those commands to be exactly the same. So what do? I create that play tag. I just move up. I'll create a controller macro. And you'll notice on the left-hand side, we're now in the controller configuration. So I'll go ahead and throw digit 7 in there just to throw something different in there. Now when I back up and I'll select the play button, you'll now see it's still play tag. That hasn't changed. But now again, we've moved up higher within the hierarchy of the pyramid. So if I go to a different source, but I'm still on the T2X, when I select that play button, it takes priority over room, over source, over global because of the level that we're operating in the pyramid. If I go to a different controller, you'll see because it didn't program at that level, it's still tied to the room macro level because it doesn't take priority. It's not part of the T2X. It's a KX7, completely different controller. We can also go backwards in this. Let's say I programmed something by accident at the control level and that didn't make sense. I want it to be a much larger scope throughout the entirety of my room. Well, we can easily back up. If I go to my T2X, select my play button, I'll go to my macro, I'll just remove the command. Now we still have the tag, that's still there, but there's nothing that lives inside of it. So now, whenever I press play, it'll be now tied to the room macro. It just moved down in the priority list. Now let's say I don't want to have the room macro, I just want everything to be tied by a specific source. Same thing, I'll just delete the command that lives inside that tag at this level. And now, when I select play, you'll see it move back down to the source level. Organization. How far do you want that tag to reach? What do you want inside that tag? And how did you organize the workspace on the left? That's what this is all based off of. Not only can we just do macros, but you can also do variables. Oh, someone did ask, I had asked before as well, can you do multiple commands? You certainly can. Because everything is a macro now, you can load this up, and then wherever I go within this source, that play command is also the same as well. So pretty straightforward there as well. I know that someone had asked that once before, so I'd figure I'd cut that off right in the beginning. So not only can we do commands, we can also do variables. Well, to do variables, let's go ahead and add something that, well, actually has variables attached to it. Going back to our workbook, we're going to grab our Nuvo P300, and let's add that guy into our system file. Now, because I want to access this streaming player throughout the entirety of my system file, which could be more or less rare or not rare, depending on the type of installs you're doing. But that's why I want to edit globally. I want to have that device, that Nuvo streaming player, be able to be accessed from every single controller within the system file. So let's go ahead and go to our drivers tab. And just a flashback from the past. Remember when I first started talking when everyone was still awake? And I said that there's a way to tell if a driver has been optimized for Apex. On the far left-hand side of our screen, in the source bar, on the far left, you have a little source icon. Kind of looks like a receiver, I think. If it has a little green dot next to it, and it might be hard to see with the resolution, you guys are going through the webinar, but believe me, it's there. There's a little green dot, and that's showing you that that driver has been optimized for Apex. It has been auto-programmed with the templates that we have included. So if you notice, like the clock driver, it hasn't been optimized, which I guess kind of makes sense. But there again, there it is. No real templates for that in your system file. All right, let's go ahead and get back on task. We do only have 30 minutes left. I'll select my Nuvo Wireless. Make sure I'm in global. Nuvo, next. Now you'll see that instead of just adding pages to one controller or two controllers, I am now adding a control page to every controller throughout my entire system file. I'll go ahead and select Add Device, and let's select No just to bounce out of this. Now, we can go on the left-hand side. Let's close our living room kitchen because we're not operating in there anymore. We'll select our player 1 for Nuvo Wireless. And we'll go ahead and select our KX7. So, like we said before, and like we'll continue to say over and over again, when you select the device, everything's sorted by the source. Player 1, Nuvo Wireless, that's where your pages are. Don't look at your controller anymore. Think a little bit bigger picture. Everything's organized by the source that you're working with. So, the next step, not only do we have a macro for our play tag, but we also have a variable now tied to our play tag. To access this variable, you can select the source variable like we did for the macro, or on the left-hand side under our source configuration, we can go ahead and select the variable list as well. Now, this is where you access your button text. Your button states. At the very bottom there, we have some objects for value and command if you were doing a slider or a dynamic image. That's where you're placing this information, all within inside a single tag. Just a big container, lots of stuff in there. So let's go ahead and add some stuff to our container. We'll go into, actually, hold up, I forgot a step. That was my fault. It's Friday. Back up. The Nuvo Wireless, I forgot to set my properties. I'm going to go to the driver properties. I'm just going to call this player 1, just for the sake of it. It looks funny when it says no players named. Back up, back to player 1. We'll go to our KX7, select our play button once again, and let's go ahead and add some variables. See, there's player 1. Like I said, it gets confusing when you just see no player selected. I'll choose player 1 play from my variable. I'll edit this to say play and then no play because I'm creative. Now we'll go back again with our mouse button and select the play, and you'll see we have the source macro and the variable macro, and well, where's the text? Well, the text hasn't really changed. We still have to physically add text to a button, and there's a couple reasons why for this. Number one, you can add multiple variables to a button. That hasn't changed, so you can put a lot of stuff inside a text box, but we have a little different spin on it now. And let's take a look at what this spin is. If I right-click a button and go to Edit Text, like always, this has not changed for our old ID hands. I'm just going to go ahead and choose a variable, much like we always have. This is still available to you. You can choose an individual variable. So it's kind of the only part that is still hanging on outside of tags. So you can still insert a single variable inside of a text box and no tags involved whatsoever. But you are kind of missing out on a little bit. And let me show you why. Now, I can just simply type in the tag I was using, and it will throw in a tag in brackets instead of variable. This will allow us not only in the future to swap out devices or to make changes, or if I screwed up and put a variable that was wrong in a bunch of different places, or let's say the driver is updated at some point and maybe we're not using player names, we're using MAC addresses and I have to change all my variables. Why? I just tag everything now and put all of that inside of the tag and then use that tag as text throughout the entirety of my system file. So let's see this in action. It now says play. I'm going to go back to my KX3, go back to an actual font, tag, play. There we go, there's my tag. I'll go to my KX3 in the garage, right click, edit text, change it to an actual font, throw a tag in there as well, play, okay, sweet. All right, so we have play button. Not only do we have a macro in there, we have a variable, so it looks like it's pressed when it's playing, and it also has some text to let me know that it's playing. Awesome. Now, what does this added functionality of that tag give me? Well, now I can go through and let's say, well, the play and the no play, not so good with the English on that one. So let's change that out and maybe throw in something a little bit better. We'll go here, we'll add some smarts to her. Now when it's stopped, it's going to say stop, and when it's not stopped, it's going to say play. Beauty. Now I can go to my KX3 in the entryway, I can go to my KX3 in the garage, I can go to my KX3 in the living room kitchen, and that single tag has now been changed throughout all three of these devices. Makes it a little bit faster, a little bit easier, and not only does it just kind of set things up in case I screw up or something's changed or a device gets changed in the system file, this also sets up a world of greatness in the future that we'll kind of briefly touch on momentarily. The next container of a tag is the ability to do page links. So not only can we do macros, we can do variables which contain text, press states, objects, sliders. We can do page links inside this as well. If you look at the top of our screen in our toolbar, we have the page link. I select that. This will bring me to the Edit Page Link window. And you can choose which individual source you wish to change to. This is where things start to get a little different than what you may be used to. This Edit Page Link, you have to think of it as a standalone page link. Now, you'll see that, well, I'm not really going to an individual page, but I am choosing a specific source that I'm going to go to, and then I'm going to select the first page within that source. Yeah, that makes sense. Again, we're just setting things up for greatness. And you'll notice that that page link lives within the controller configuration, very top of the pyramid. Controller configuration for our page links. Think of this, programming-wise, is exactly like a standalone page change. So let's actually just remove this page link, none, gone. Oops. I'll change my system to standalone and throw in a page link. Think of this as the same exact thing, just kind of a different way of looking at it. There is a little more refinement in a direct page link, like I can choose a specific frame. That's in there as well, but we'll kind of touch on that a little bit later. I'm going to go ahead and delete this page link just because I don't need something in there. And this does work again. Those direct page links with this button at the top is done at the controller level, top of the pyramid. Last but not least is the text tags. This is a little bit pretty much similar to the variable source where we go into the button text. In fact, it's pretty much exactly the same thing. It's just another way of editing or get to it. Much as the way you'd hit variable list on the left, you can edit the source variable, or you can do the room variable or the controller variable. It's just another way of quickly getting to whichever variable you want to program that. So it's a little bit faster to get to it than scrolling through a variable list or selecting the button itself and digging into it. So it's entirely up to you. Just multiple ways to access the same thing. But it's all nice and visible when you select a button. You know exactly that we're at the source level. Or if you select thumbs up, you know exactly we're at the source macro here. Or if I press a home button, you'll see that there's a page link associated with it. So it's just a good, quick overall view of the button you have selected. Quick and easy, just to let you know what's going on. As Justin had said, you can always just hover over those little green check marks too, and it'll give you a good idea what's going on there as well when that pops up.
Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for our next video where you'll watch our technical trainer add a multi-room audio driver to the system file. We'll see you there.